Hi, welcome to Let's Talk Careers. I'm your host, Lisa Bauman. Today in this episode, I'm going to be talking with Vicki Noel-Cornish, who is a people enthusiast and principal consultant for the company You. In our conversation, we talk about bouncing back from setback and finding her authentic self. I hope you enjoy her effervescent personality as much as I did. Well, welcome, Vicki. I am so glad that you're here.
Me too.
I'm going to get you to introduce yourself. Okay. And as you introduce yourself, why don't you just say a little bit about what you do right now and something you're super passionate about?
Okay, so I am Vicki Noel-Cornish. And what I do right now is I'm an entrepreneur right now, and I'm starting my own business called the company You. There's been quite a path. We'll talk about that. But what I'm passionate about is inspiring people and inspiring them to be their best selves and doing it in a way that is positive, not looking at like, oh, look at all the negative things that you have. But here's all the good things. Or can we flip a script because you think of yourself in maybe a negative way? Flip it around. What do others see that you don't see? So I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, wonderful. So let's dive into the very beginning. What was your first paid job? Maybe as a young person or just as you graduated after post-secondary. What was your first paid job? What did you do?
Well, I've been thinking about that question because my first paid job was just working as a gas attendant in my village, the local gas station.
Nice.
But the coolest job that I had while I was going to university was the first female ice resurfacing machine operator in the township that I grew up in.
Wow. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, so for those who don't know, ice resurfacing machine, most people would call it a Zamboni.
Yes.
But that is a brand name. Okay. But I was trained on an Olympia, which is actually used to be manufactured in Elmira.
Okay.
So, and I don't know if it still is, but anyway, I had this job for several years while I was going to university during the summer mostly. But then when I was transitioning from being done university and then going out into the world, I needed a full-time job to kind of bridge the gap. And I took on this job as an Olympia driver.
Crazy.
And so, yeah, I was trained.
How did you get that? How did you get into that?
So, like I said, I started out in the summers. I was just hired on to paint playground equipment.
Okay.
I developed myself. Like I got along great with everybody, was a team player. I just showed all the good skills that people want to see. And my boss was just like, come back next summer and then come back next summer. And then it was kind of turning into like, can you stay a little bit longer? Can you help us put in the ice? Can you help us take out the ice? That kind of thing. And then when I was transitioning kind of into the real world, I just said, like, can I learn how to drive the Olympia? Because, we had a couple of older gentlemen doing it.
Right.
And there were a couple of younger gentlemen doing it on the weekends who trained me. And I actually ended up marrying one of them.
Oh, that's another story.
Another story. But yeah, I was like, can I be trained? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I was trained. There were three of us girls who were trained. And the one was recently married and expecting. So she's like, she backed off a little bit. She's like, I don't think I can continue on with the training. But the two of us that did, I'm here now. And the other one is now like the CFO of the Woodstock Hospital. So it just goes to show. But township being rural, very accustomed to seeing men do that kind of thing. And of course, they would just get on and do the job and like, But we would get on and we would wave to the crowd. And
I see.
We turned it into a real experience.
Fun, yeah.
And I still to this day put that on my resume because I think it says something when people ask.
Yeah, I think
lots to unpack with that.
Yeah, those foundational positions where you get started are pretty critical to setting you up for success a little bit later on.
100%.
Right? So where did you end up going to university?
I went to the University of Guelph for drama.
Okay.
I was going to be an actress, which is why I'm like loving this opportunity. It's more performance. I love to act. I still do it in a community theater, but I learned very early on that that's not, I don't want to make a career out of that.
Okay. So what did you do? Like how did that decision come to play and what did you do after graduating?
So I just realized, you know what, after about 6 shows, now I only did 2 shows in university because university is very theoretical. Didn't really understand that at the time. I was over 80%. And so I was encouraged to go to university because that was the mindset of the time. If you were over 80, you're going this direction. If you're not, going in that direction, which of course makes a whole big, like college became kind of the second cousin, which I know we're still trying to change that because there's, like how the president always used to say it, because I used to work at Conestoga. He would say, one is not better than or less than the other. They're different. And so if I had known then what I know now, I probably would have went to college and should have went to college. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, this is not something I want to make a career out of. I can't stand, after I do a show of 6 nights, I'm done. I'm bored. It's hard for me to make it new. And every person that's out in that audience has paid for the same ticket. They deserve the same show as the person that came the first night. And after 6 nights, I'm like, how do I put that kind of energy into it? So that, no, this isn't going to be for me. So then I went to teacher's college because it made sense. My boyfriend at the time was going. I wanted to follow him. And that's what I did. I taught for a year.
Okay. Where'd you go to teacher's college then?
University of Windsor.
Okay. And then you ended up teaching where?
Grand Erie District School Board.
Okay.
For, like I said, for about a year.
Okay.
But not once through teacher's college, volunteering, supply, my first like paid full-time gig, never found joy in it and realized you really have to be passionate about what you're doing because you're spending so much of your time in it.
Yeah. So what did you do after that?
Well, then I went into a huge depression because I'd spent so much time and money on doing this. And I went to a career counselor, all the stuff I should have done in the first place, but didn't understand, and realized, you know what I really like? I like doing what the career counselor's doing, like asking questions and pulling stuff out of people, inspiring them and getting them to see that, you know what, you've got gifts, but you have to understand that they're gifts, which is kind of where this whole thing came. I want to inspire people because once they're inspired, then you find the path. And so during that time, it took about a year off. I got a government subsidized job, which was meant for university graduates who weren't finding work because they didn't have they had skills and knowledge, but not applicable to the workforce. Yeah,
I think I remember that. I think I looked at your profile and I think we're kind of in around the same age, I feel like. And I think I remember that. It was also sort of 90-ish, 1990s. It was a tough
Late
time
90s.
in the economy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I was taking this program and it was fantastic, but it was a government stipend. It was $200 a week. I had to live at home with my parents, which I know nowadays is more the norm than not. But at that time, I was really I was ashamed of that, which should never be ashamed of that. You do what you do. And anyway, I got through. And during that time, I realized this is what I want to do. And at that time, Conestoga College had just started what we called then postgraduate diploma programs. And I'm like, this is too good to be true. In 8 months, I can be a career development practitioner.
Right.
And they took out all the stuff that I already have. Like I didn't have to do Business 101.
Yes.
Because I had all that.
Yes.
And so I'm like, I'm going to give it a try because what else am I going to do? So I went for 8 months. It was the most therapeutic year in my life. I understood then the difference between practical education and theoretical education. It's important if you can do both to have both. But if you're looking for a job right away, it's good to have the hands-on because then you can show it to an employer. Yeah.
So you took the career development practitioner program. Yeah. And that was with Rob. Is that right?
It was with Rob Straby. Shout out to Rob.
Yeah. He's still around.
I know he is. He just followed my page on LinkedIn.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you took the program.
Yep.
Incredibly therapeutic. And then what did you do from there?
So there's a practicum with that, which most of the programs at Conestoga have a practical component, whether it's practicum, field placement, or co-op. And I did that in Tillsonburg. That's where I'm from. And I worked for... I went from my practicum right into a job. It was a mat leave, but it was still. And then from there, I'm getting goosebumps. I got a job at Conestoga because I knew the mat leave was coming to an end. I'd gone to Conestoga, so I knew about the school. And I applied they had 6 positions that had just opened up because the government was putting money into employment and career counseling because we had so many unemployed people at that time that needed help figuring out how to get into the workforce. And then long story short, I ended up in student recruitment for 12 years.
Okay, hang on. We can't do long story short.
Oh, no.
We can't do long story short. I need to know a few details. So you came in so what area did you work in? Did you work in?
Oh, gosh. What was it called at the time?
Career and Academic Access?
Yes.
Yeah. And did you do students? Did you do the public?
I did the public.
Okay.
And so I worked with, we would call them adults, even though that's not really, we're differentiating because there was a program at that time called Job Connect. We were working with youth under 24. I was working with everybody else ahead of that. So we called them adults, adult career counseling, but both sections are adults. It's just whatever. I did that for 4 years. And when I went on a mat leave, my first mat leave, a position in co-op came up. And I loved what I did because I helped adults complete applications to get funding from the government to go back to school and retrain because for whatever reason their job was obsolete or they had had an injury and needed to reskill. And I loved it, but I am a very empathetic person who can give and give and give. And I was burning out because these people are coming in and I was doing a lot of mental health work. You know, they've lost their job. I remember one woman called me up one day. She'd lost her job and she was hysterical. Her husband had threatened to leave her and it wasn't that he wanted to leave her. He was just stressed and he was saying things that, and I talked her off the edge is what I did. And I remember going home that night and just falling apart. I'm like, I love what I do, but I don't think I can carry this on forever.
Yeah. The impact of families is incredible. Right?
Yes.
Well, you know that, you know me. I totally believe that we need more career support for people in all phases of life. Even if you're fully employed, I still think you need career services support.
You need maintenance.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Have to go for a coffee sometime and just chat. But yes.
So you did your mat leave and then you moved into co-op. Okay.
And it was a full-time position. I was really excited. Now I had to drop down a couple pay grades to do it. But I was excited about the thought of you working with the students because they're in a different stage, right? They're more optimistic. They're excited. There's possibilities. They've got a little bit more of a effervescence to them. And so I was looking forward to it. But then another person was displaced out of her job. And because I dropped down, I had a lot of seniority where I was. But when I dropped down a couple pay grades, I lost it. And I got bumped out of that job and then was in a position of instability, which meant I'm employed. But if there's no job for me, then I have to take whatever or I have to leave. And I didn't want to. And so a job came up in recruitment because I loved co-op. I loved that. And this job came up in recruitment and I'm like, I don't know. I was really at the time, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence, right? Because you're in the college, you're working with academics and some of the faculty are very brilliant people. And I was very intimidated about of going into this marketing. It was marketing at the time. Now I think recruitment falls under the registrar, but at the time it was marketing. So they were really looking for flashy new ideas, somebody with a lot of energy. And I'm like, well, I got the energy thing for sure, but I don't know if I've got the skills. I just went in and I think I blew them. I'd like to think I blew them away, but I was supposed to give a presentation. Well, I'm like, it's marketing. So I went out and I bought I knew I'd have 3 people on the panel and I bought 3 water bottles and I printed off labels that read, I had to do a presentation. Marketing at the time was the new degree in international business. And I'm like, okay, so I put international business and I stole the logos offline, probably illegally, but I made these water bottles and I went in and I gave everybody on the panel a water bottle. And I did up this presentation with, at the time was cutting edge animation, which now I look back and I'm like, oh, so lame. But yeah, and I just went in and before I went in, I just took a deep breath and was like, you got nothing to lose, Vicki. You've got a job for now. Do the best you can.
Yeah.
And I went in and I did the best I could and I got the job. And I did it for 12 years.
And did you love it?
I loved it. In fact, you might have to cut this out. I don't know if I'm allowed to say I'm coming back in the fall to do part-time recruitment because
It's amazing.
I loved it.
That's amazing.
But,
so
yeah.
what it reminds me of is something called happenstance theory.
Yes.
Right? That you think things are just random, but they aren't. They all come together, and you fell into it more so than anything else. And you fell into something. I knew you loved the position. That's why I was like waiting for it.
Yeah.
I knew you loved it, right?
Oh, yes.
And
100%.
You know, that I think that's what strikes me is that, you know, and perhaps you share a little bit more about it, but, you know, I think it comes from a spirit of being open to possibilities, open to, you know, where something could be, because truly you could have been at a choice point that said, no, I'm not going to do this. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And said, no, I'm going to embrace it. And I'm going to try a few tricks that I think might be helpful.
Yeah.
And give it a whirl.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And I call it synchronicity.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I believe that the universe hands you what you're supposed to do, and you got to figure it out. And there have been some things where I'm like, oh my gosh, like some days where I just had to been like, okay, I'm angry and I didn't get what I wanted. And that's not fair because I worked so hard and I'm so open. And then the next day I wake up and I'm like, okay, I got that out of my system.
Yep.
I was handed an opportunity. Where do we go from here?
Yeah. I think that's crazy. So that was okay. So wait, you're here for 12 years. We're not finished the story yet.
No.
What happens next?
So we're going to backstep a little bit. While I was doing the career development practitioner program, my sister got a job at Disney. And she came home and they were doing things then that we are just starting to embrace as the world now post-pandemic. But again, I'm getting goosebumps. So at the time, there was no there was internet, but it was like very beginning stages.
So we're going back early 90s.
1999.
Yeah.
That was because she was Y2K working at Disney.
Gotcha.
Which was terrifying.
Good times. Good times.
Yes. So she's working at Disney, and this is before, like I said, this is before internet. So we still were paying long distance. I mean, we still pay long distance, but at that time, long distance was a big deal.
It was big.
And I grew up in a household where we were very careful, like very frugal, because we didn't have a lot of money, and we made what we had the best that we could make it. But we were told, don't call home unless you have to, if it's an emergency, or Sunday night at 11 o'clock when it's cheap. So those are the only times that Karen was allowed to call home. And we get this phone call early morning, Mother's Day, Sunday, prime time. And we're like, what are you doing? She's like, well, I just came to work and there's a sign on the bulletin board that says, call your mom on us. Because she was working in the Canada Pavilion. So everybody was long distance, right? They're all Canadians in the Canadian Pavilion. They said, you've got 15 minutes, call your mom on Mickey. And we were like, what? So she had 15 minutes to say, I love you, Mom. You know, I'm thinking of you. I got 50 minutes to tell you how I'm doing. Like, I'm working in merchandising today and all this stuff. And I just thought, well, that's different. And then when she got home and was able to sit down and talk to us, they had newsletters that went out highlighting all the good things that people did in their different jobs. They had 2 weeks of training right out of the gate, in-class training where they learned the history of Disney. They learned image and etiquette because they have to present themselves, right? They learned, what do you do in a crisis? What do you do if somebody drops their $8 slushie that they paid for? You know, that's a lot of money to a lot of people who are coming here. You go and you get them another one, no cost, because we'll get them to come back in the future, at which point we're going to reap back that $8 that we spent to replace that. And I was like, what? That just seemed out of just unreal. And then when she got through her training, they all got gowns and caps, and they graduated from Disney University, which is different than Disney Institute. That's for the public, but Disney University is for staff. And she's in a gown and she gets like professional portraits done with Mickey. And she says, you know, when you hear Mickey Mouse, oh, that's such a Mickey Mouse presentation. She said, where I'm at, that is the best. Like, if it's Mickey Mouse, it's top notch, because Disney does things like nobody else.
Yeah.
And so she's telling me this, and I'm just like, I'm inspired I'm like, that's the way it should be at all places. All places should treat their people like that. and constantly getting like, they're at the time they were called You Rock cards. And she'd just get a card from like random people that would say like, you made my day because, and they would fill in. And she'd had this stack of these You Rock cards at the end. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. So that's where I was heading. Like, I'm really interested in motivating employees. So I'm like, I kind of want to do the HR thing. And as much as I loved my job, I was 45 when I left. I'm like, I'm not getting any younger and I want to do HR. And I had somebody who I knew from where I grew up who was like, if you're interested, we want to start bringing on people and develop them in HR to be consultants. And then she called me one day. She's like, I have an opportunity. If you want to take it, this is where you're going to get this.
So where was this?
This was at BDO.
Okay. So that's when you left the college.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me more about your experience there.
So very different from here. Here it's union. So there's like, you work towards your seniority and you develop kind of, you create your own path, which I'm not very good at creating my own path. I mean, it fell in my lap always, but I wasn't good at really structuring a navigational path. Whereas BDO was all, this is what you're doing. What's the next step? And once you get to that step, what's the next step? Which I loved. And they were very clear. Like the performance reviews were very clear. These are the targets that you are to meet. You are meeting this one. You're not quite meeting this one. How do we get you up to the next spot? It was really tough. And I was never before given that kind of feedback where what you're not doing right. I was so used to always like, oh, you do this great, which you need both. And I didn't want to hear it, to be honest. I didn't want to hear the negative because negative doesn't feel good. But it was that negative, maybe not negative, but developmental feedback that really pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And then some new leadership came in and they were taking some things in a different direction. And I was let go. And I don't get fired. I'm an overachiever. How can you tell me? Like, I don't want to say I knew it was coming, but there were things that maybe I wasn't quite getting to where I wanted it to be. But when that new leadership came in and different decisions were being made, it was kind of like I understood it. And it's a terrible feeling. And like I took probably a week where I said, okay, I'm going to be miserable for a week, be depressed for a week. But at the same time, I'm like, I can like do my own thing now. And I have the skills now. And I know what it's like to be fired. I know what it's like I know what recruitment is all about from an HR perspective. And so now I've got career development and HR. I also am finding that I'm on the path to being diagnosed with ADHD, which brings so much enlightenment. And yeah, so I'm just like, I have such opportunity. As much as it was very disheartening to lose my job, the universe is like giving me the kick. Like, you have other things to do and you're not. I was never going to leave because I felt I was being, guided. Yeah. But I was being guided. And now the universe is taking over and saying, okay, it's time for you to do your own thing.
Yeah. So where you're at now is that you're starting to create your own business, like you said, the U company.
Yeah.
What has been the transition like? Because that, I think, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to share that was a terrible time in your moment, because a lot of people, and there's a lot of stigma attached to it, 100%. Right? There's so much shame, so much stigma, and I don't want to say like normalize it, but how did you move yourself through the tougher parts? And how did you, you're a very cheerful, super awesome, super person. Right. So it seems like, oh yeah, that was just, brush it off, whatever. But how did you get yourself through that?
That is a great question, because it wasn't easy. And I have knowing now. So I'm very clear on mental health. It's something that is in my family, and I'm where I live close to Woodstock. A few years ago, we had a huge suicide crisis. In fact, we probably are still in it. But And I would love hearing the stories about people that would come out and say, like, I've attempted it, and but I've come out on the other side, and now I advocate and I'm great, only to find out a few weeks later they succumb to it. And I'm like, so I'm like, I've never worried about it myself, but I understand, like, when people say, I don't understand how somebody like who is doing so well could have done that to themselves. And I'm like, I understand it because I know that dark side. And I've understood it at a very young age. So I've been very intentional about getting help, going to see counselors. And I've seen so many counselors. But this last time, I'm like, okay, I was just fired. I know this is a very big thing, and I'm going to need some help. But I don't want to talk through it. I want to. I watch Queer Eye on Netflix, and Karamo. He's the they call him the cultural expert or something. But I love how he has physical activities that he walks people through. Like, one of them was like building a wall of all the bad negative things that have happened. Build this wall with cardboard boxes, but each piece of the wall identifies something that really gets under your skin. So they build this wall out of cardboard boxes, and he's like, what does that wall look like? And of course they describe it and what it feels like. And then he's like, okay, now all your might, you are going to tear that wall down, and I want to hear you yelling and screaming. And I'm like, what? I've never gone through anything like that. And I feel like I need that physical connection. So I sought out a cognitive behavioral therapist, and she's just like listening to me. She's like, well, you have ADHD. And I'm like, well, tell me something I don't know. She's like, but have you been diagnosed? And I'm like, well, no, but so people close to me, I know, have been diagnosed with or close to a diagnosis. And it's very clear. But he was a young boy, and young boys tend to demonstrate in very clear ways that they have it, right? They get in people's face. They can't sit still. They're not focused. They talk all the time. They're, squirrel, like we hear that, right? And that's certainly what he was. And yes, I can admit now that squirrels do really catch my attention, but I have like really worked at coping mechanisms. Like, I find out very early on, what is it that will please someone and give me the reinforcement I want? And if it's sitting still, like I have exercised that muscle that I can sit still and I can stare in one spot for hours. Yep. What am I doing? Am I listening? No. Am I gaining information? No, I'm not, because I'm thinking about, don't move, just stare at Lisa. That's what you're supposed to do. And when she starts saying this, like, I cannot like cry and go through so many things. But now I'm like, okay, so that explains all these things. And now I'm trying to embrace that side of me. But it's 50 years that I have been building up this persona that I want the world to see. So when you say that I'm cheerful, a lot of times I'm not. There's other stuff going on that I don't want you to see, but has been so getting through that, I was lucky early on to know that this is going to be an issue for me. So I have to put some things in place to make sure it doesn't get the front seat.
Yeah. What else did you do you said things in place. So you talked about going to therapy, getting cognitive behavior therapy, looking at, motivational people to kind of inspire you. What else did you do?
I love conspiracy theories, and all my podcasts are like conspiracy theories and true crime and stuff that is really dark. I'm like, I can't, as much as I want to listen to that stuff, I'm now listening to Mel Robbins and Tracy Otsuka, who is big on like ADHD. We need to change it. It's not ADHD because that's got deficit and disorder in it. And it's not, it's just different. But I like that she uses neurodivergency, but even that I think isn't necessarily the best, but it's better. So I use that. But I've been intentional about like, what am I watching? What's my language? Because I used to say things like, I just can't accept that. Or I hate exercise. I hate it. I don't want to do it. Well, that has power and it becomes part of your psyche. And so that it's like, I wake up in the morning and I know I need to exercise because It's going to help my mental health. It's going to make me feel better about myself. I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to look better, which, as much as I hate to say it, it is a big part of feeling better about myself. I lose weight. I feel better. There's nothing bad about it, but yet, what am I saying? I hate it. So I'm having to really change, like, yeah. You don't hate it. You just,
it's not a preferred.
Yeah. You struggle to start, but once you get started, Vicki, you're fine.
Yeah.
And so, so it's not easy, but I know that I can help other people to do that.
So tell me more about the decision to go on your own.
Well, I know the struggles that I've had. I know that I love career development. I know that I love student recruitment. And what I've loved about that is inspiring that one person that's like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm like, well, then let's talk about that. And they're like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. And I don't want to do that. But see, I don't want to do anything. And I'm like, no, we need to look at that. That's just as important and as exciting. Yeah, let's take a pen and go through. So I, of course, was always giving out calendars that had all the programs in it. Let's go through and look at all these programs that we have. And let's take a big marker and cross off the ones you don't like and see what's left. Because even if there's only 5 left, that's 5 choices now that you're going to be a little bit clearer on. And let's dig into those. And they're like, whoa, wow, what a way to look at it. I'm like, yeah, so don't ever underestimate all the things that you think are not right, because they're going to lead you to the things that are right.
Yeah.
So that was, that was very important. Like I said, the ADHD thing, and I'm also like, I'm honing my speaking skills now. I'm starting to see a speaking consultant because I know I was going to be an actress. I like to perform. I like to be in front of people. But why not be in front of people with a message? So if they're going to listen to me, why not listen to me give a good message? So I'm really trying to hone that. I'd like to take off on that because that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah,
it's
that's amazing.
Inspiring people.
How did you find that person?
That's a good question. How did I honestly, I think I just started listening to podcasts. And so this is Jane Atkinson. She's out of London. And she had a podcast. Actually, no, there was another. Allison Graham reached out to me because I think I was I was being in HR at BDO. She was interested. She's like, I talked to these groups. And then I think she mentioned Jane Atkinson. And I apologize if I've got that wrong. So I tuned into her podcast and I'm like, okay. At the time, I was like, I don't know. I listened to a few. And then somebody's like, come with me. I'm going to a speaking symposium where they're just going to like do some fun exercises. And the door prize was Jane Atkinson's book. And I went, oh my gosh, I just saw her podcast like the other day. And they're like, well, you know what? We're not even going to pull the name out of the hat. Clearly, you need to have this book. And I won her book. And I mean, it went on the bookshelf because I was like, I'm not really ready for this. But then when I'm like, I'm going back to Jane Atkinson. And then I did like one of her 5-day quick things just to see what it was all about. And I'm the only Canadian on the call. And she wasn't even really talking to Canadians because she was talking about like the National Speakers Bureau, which is out of the States and all this. And I'm just like, wait a second. I'm like, I'm in Canada. She's like, well, where are you? And I said, well, I'm in Norwich, Ontario. She's like, oh my goodness, you're like so close to me. I said, I know. Like, I could quite honestly run into you at Starbucks someday, which I would love. And then she's like, yeah, like there's some different things with Canada. They run things a little differently. So, but yeah, that's how I found her. And then now, so I work with her a little bit. I don't get to talk to her so much, but I have exposure to her, online courses and whatnot. And then I can chime into her team when I have questions and stuff like that. So that's just preliminary though. Hopefully at one time I'll have her like really critiquing and pushing me forward.
So what are you hoping to do in the future? You're starting up a business. What are you hoping to do? I would love to be like the Canadian Mel Robbins. I love her way of like, sometimes you need a kick in the ass and sometimes you need to just take a few minutes. And like, my favorite podcast, it was 15 minutes long. She chimes in, says, I'm sick today. I feel like crap. You're not going to get the best me, but I just wanted you to know that I'm like you. I have bad days. And in fact, I'm going to end this podcast now because I got to go sleep. But I just want you to know I'm still here for you. I believe in you. And I'm just like,
that's what I want to be, is that real person that inspires those people, that thinks that everybody out in Hollywood or wherever, however they see on TikTok, is like, oh, the best thing out there. And sure, you can be the best thing out there, but everybody has a bad day and everybody has things about them that they don't see as being great. And I'm here to say it is great. Yeah. Embrace it.
Do you have any plans on how you might accomplish it? Or are you putting it out to, like, how do you think you might go approach, like, do you have a pathway that you've set for yourself? Do you, like, how do you think you might achieve that?
That's one thing I'm really good at is research. I have learned that throughout myself. I've also, so I'm a Colby consultant, and that means that I can help people assess their natural strengths. So that's just like how you go about things. It's not personality. It is not your cognitive abilities. So that's your skills and your thinking. Because I mean, you look back, thinking and feeling, that's kind of the two frames of thought. But there's also another thing. We do things naturally. Babies, before they know what a thought is, before they know any knowledge whatsoever or personality, they know there's things I need to do to get food. And if you look at that, ultimately, that's how they grow up being. Like, so for example, if I started walking at 8 months of age. And of course, people, this is what they tell me. I don't remember this. It's not that precocious. My mom, they would tell my mom, oh, she's so smart. She's going to be so ahead of her game because I was walking sooner. You know, then my son starts walking at 18 months of age. Oh, it's too bad he didn't start walking sooner, but that's okay. You know, all kids by 5 years of age are running around creating problems for their parents. All kids. They just went about it differently. And what I know about myself now is I would be termed a quick start, which I think also ties into ADHD. It's not about it being a deficit. It's just that I'm thinking in the future. I'm way out here going, oh my gosh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And to some people who like to, like, no, we need to do this first and then this and then this. Like don't jump in the pool before you know how to swim. And I'm like, heck, I'll figure it out. And I do, right? But I just know, learning that growing up now and having that knowledge, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to just brainstorm the possibilities and all the things that I need help with. I now line people up. So that's what I'm doing. I've lined up Jane because I want to be a speaker, and I'm sick, like not sick and tired, but I've always just kind of thought like that's what the good people in the world get to do. Right. That's never going to be me. Oh. But as I'm growing up, I'm like,
hang on a second.
Why can't it be me?
Exactly.
I like to be in front of people. There are people that don't want to be in front of people.
That's right.
And they shouldn't be if that's not where they want to be.
Yep.
I want to be.
Yep.
So I should be.
Yeah.
And what do I need to do to get there in front of people?
Yeah.
I need to get somebody to help me.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do is I'm just putting it out there saying like, what do I need? And other people will tell me, well, you should touch base with this person. Have you been in touch with this person? Oh my goodness, we're looking for speakers. Would you be interested? I'm like, this is and when you do that, when you start putting that out there, what comes back is exactly what you hoped for.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. What would you say to somebody who is a lot like you? You know, in terms of maybe being a little bit different in the way that they approach things, maybe, you know, a young person who's thinking about, you know, how do they lead to their strengths, given that they may also, you know, whether it's diagnosed or not, have some type of neurodiversity. What would you sort of say to those folks?
I'd say, well, like there's a place for everybody. We need everybody in their place.
Yeah.
I've got lots and lots of like labor market research and like just studies behind me to say like, we know you can be successful, but you got to figure out what it is. You got to take some time and you have to embrace those setbacks because those setbacks lead you to understand the path forward. And I also like to, like, if you need an accountability person, that's me. Because a lot of times that's it, you know, we can have these great ideas and we think, yeah, tomorrow I'm going to get out of bed and I'm going to do it. And then you wake up in the morning and you don't get out of bed because it's cold and the bed's warm. And, you know, if you need somebody to chime in and say, get out, like, I'm going to call you. And if you're not out of bed, I'm coming over. maybe it's not me, but somebody, let's put something in place. Like I would just say, like, you can do it, but maybe you need to find a different way of doing it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Your path is your path. And if it doesn't look like their path, it doesn't matter. It's your path. You're the only one that can travel your path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I have one more question for you. What gives you hope? What gives you hope?
Wow, that's a great question. What does give me hope? You know what? We just came through a pandemic. And even in the pandemic, I was excited because it's going to force change. And it has forced change. I mean, I know that there will be repercussions. It's like that with anything. But just, you know what? Like, if you don't like where you're at or things aren't, figure out what you need to do to make it better. Every situation has an opportunity in it, but you have to choose it. So it gives me hope that I can choose, even though like the world's in a pandemic, like things are going to look different on the other side. And oh my goodness, of course, then there's me living in the future again. What's it going to look like? What can we do with this? So yeah, so it just gives me hope knowing that there's a choice in deciding, am I either going to sit in the suck or am I going, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
But what are you going to learn from that?
Yeah.
In order to get out of it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's
a pleasure.
This was incredible. Wow, what a great conversation. Thank you for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Careers. If you liked this episode and want to hear more, follow us on Spotify and subscribe on YouTube. See you in the next one.